In 1845, a strange disease began turning Ireland's potato plants black. Within months, the crop that fed millions had begun to rot. But the Great Famine was not simply a story about bad potatoes. It was the collapse of an entire food system, one built on poverty, dependence, and very little room for failure. So how did one crop failure become one of the worst disasters in 19th century Europe? In the 1840s, many poor rural families in Ireland lived on small plots of rented land. For them, potatoes were not just one food among many. They were the foundation of survival. Potatoes produced a large amount of food from relatively little land, making them especially important to families with limited resources. But this efficiency created a dangerous weakness. If the potato harvest failed, poor families often had little money, few savings, and no reliable alternative. Ireland was an agricultural country. Grain, livestock, and other products were being produced and sold. But food being present in a market did not mean that starving families could afford it. Many poor tenants had to pay rent, and their ability to buy food depended on income from small plots and agricultural work. This was the hidden weakness. Ireland could produce food, but the poorest people could not always access the food they needed. In 1845, potato blight reached Ireland. The disease, caused by an organism called Phytophthora infestans, attacked the plants and caused the potatoes to rot. At first, some people hoped the damage would be temporary, but the crop failed again in later years. One failed harvest was devastating. Repeated failure was catastrophic. Families began selling possessions, reducing their meals, borrowing money, and leaving their homes. Landlords still expected rent. Markets still operated. But the people most affected by the crop failure had almost no purchasing power. That is what turns a food shortage into a famine. Not only the amount of food available, but whether people can obtain it. Relief efforts were created, including public works, soup kitchens, and poor relief. But assistance was often slow, limited, or difficult for desperate families to access. Hunger also weakened the body. Overcrowded workhouses and temporary shelters allowed disease to spread, adding illness to starvation and poverty. The famine was becoming more than a failed harvest. It was now a public health and social disaster. Ireland continued exporting some agricultural goods during the famine. But the issue was more complicated than simply saying Britain took all the food. The deeper problem was access. Food could exist in the market while starving families had no money to buy it. Hunger and disease killed about 1 million people. Many others fled Ireland, leaving behind homes and communities permanently changed by the famine. Ireland's Great Famine was triggered by a plant disease, but not caused by disease alone. Society had become dangerously dependent on one crop. Many families had little land, wealth, or protection when harvests failed. When the potato collapsed, the system around it broke. Ireland shows how a society can look powerful yet remain fragile when people cannot access food. Rome relied on distant supply lines. Ireland relied on a crop that could fail. In both cases, the hidden weakness was dependence. If this story taught you something new, like, share, and subscribe for more powerful lessons from history.